Day 902 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 593,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,160 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 5 tanks, 17 APVs, 36 artillery, and 1 air defense system. Then straight into the map we go, and to the Kursk counteroffensive, or counter-invasion if you will, with a great deal of activity ongoing. And to start off with a simple map comparison, just to show you the sheer scale of difference between Russia's May 11th cross-border incursion into Kharkiv, as it stands against Ukraine's August 6 cross-border Kursk military activities. And what a stark contrast we see right here, with the AFU holding approximately 44 settlements in Kursk plus an additional 10 under question. All of which accounts for a new milestone of about 1,000 square kilometers of Russian-held land now, as per advice from General Zelenskyy, head of Ukraine's armed forces. And so to jump into a different map today, and we'll start out in the Sudzha direction of the Kursk activities within Russia, because to the northeast of the town of Sudzha, it was noted that Ukraine re-entered, or never lost, Martinovka on the outskirts, and this is after some initial claims of recapture by the Akhmat forces of Russia. And as for Sudzha itself, a Ukrainian town for a brief period about 100 years ago has in a sense come back under Ukrainian control again, with more video published of the Ukrainian military in central parts of the town. Now, Sudzha was previously the key stronghold of Russian defense in the district, and its loss now is expected to lead to further territorial gains by Ukrainian forces in the coming days. Then headed across to Ukraine's eastern incursion point into Kursk, where there are 2 potential attack vectors into the locations of Giri and Belitsa, with mostly just Ukraine's use of the northern attack vector being exploited at this stage, with the AFU advancing over 20 kilometers towards Giri and in some cases just beyond it or around it. However, Ukraine's reconnaissance in force groups lost some BTR APVs in the process, after a failed attack somewhere near to the settlement. Meanwhile, Russia really has to watch out for the southern axis here, with Ukraine crossing some entirely separate border points, but more on that shortly. Because as for Kursk, fighting northeast of Koronevo continued, with heavy fighting just beyond it, at Tolpino, Vitrino, and even to the further north at Alexandrovka, as the AFU is attempting to make multiple attempts to break through, as per a Russian source, particularly around this northwestern sector. And then just nearby, the AFU is also consolidating further areas of control at Lyubimovka, or should I say Lyubimivka, with one such Ukrainian soldier renaming the signage to sound more Ukrainian. Also, just beyond this point, Russian sources have reported that the Ukrainian armed forces are conducting raid operations with 3 armored vehicles spotted near the settlement of Snegost. But okay, now here's the thing. We're getting Russian sources information at pretty much real time, and sometimes they're right, other times they're just wildly inaccurate. Whereas Ukraine demonstrates much better operational security. But the reason why Russian reports might be wildly inaccurate at times is because that's just part of the rosy reports that it sends back up the chain of command. So although Russia makes it sound like Snegost as if activities are just starting, they've truly been underway for some time now, with Ukraine extending further beyond, not unlike a curious goose or geese. And as for the wider picture in this region, reports seem to indicate that Ukrainian troops are digging trenches in Russia's Kursk region, suggesting a deeper incursion than a different approach of a mere border raid. And so this is where it could get tricky for the Russian forces, as Ukrainian entrenchments could complicate Russian efforts to repel them, And while there is no official comment from Kyiv at this stage, this development may indicate Ukraine's intent to hold the region and/or divert Russian forces. Interestingly, for this region as well, it's also been said that law and order in frontline Russian-held areas is reported to have completely collapsed. As per the Russian Telegram channel VCHK, with rampant looting said to have broken out, and specifically being done by the Russians themselves. Then on the map we also saw the cheeky joke of a Ukrainian soldier posting a video pretending to have taken Lvov further north, just a little bit west of the Kursk nuclear power plant. So that would have given the Russian MOD a real scare, I'm sure. Then headed across to Belgorod of Russia, because it's not all Kursk, with the continuation of border raids into Kolotylovka, so I'll zoom right into that one there, with two more such examples just like it, including Peroz and Bezymeno, and I'll zoom out for a bit of better context there. Any closer and the AFU will start to flank the Russian Kharkiv front of Hiloboka and Vovchansk, wedged there between Kharkiv and Belgorod. In fact, bordering Ukraine, just beyond Russian Bezymeno, is right at the intersecting point between the Ukrainian Sumy and Kharkiv Oblast as well. So these types of cross-border actions by the Ukrainian army make for some incredibly interesting propositions, so to speak, because Russia may have expected a lot in this war, but may never truly have considered getting invaded right back. So I cannot tell you enough how the dynamic of this war may have changed forever. So, taking a look at the Russian response to all of these engagements, well, starting off, a Russian attack helicopter mistakenly fired on his own column in the Kursk region, destroying two Russian Mr. S self-propelled howitzers. Oddly enough, Russian media propagandists have already presented this as the destruction of a Ukrainian column. So, this is where combined arms warfare comes in really handy. Having a situational awareness on the battlefield, amongst your different units, and indeed amongst the different branches of your military. Take the hypothetical, if Russia actually operated all of their branches and equipment to the same level as, or near to the same level as most Western countries' militaries, then we would likely see a much more effective Russian army before us today. Oh, but moving on, because a further Russian response to all of this, in the Kursk region in particular at the moment, is the appointment of Colonel General Alexei Dyumin, a presidential aide who has taken command of Russian forces in Kursk and is reportedly already in the region following directives from President Putin. Dyumin's leadership aims to address previous command and control issues. And so, would anybody like to take a guess at what this means? Well, Putin's presidential aide is taking over Kursk operations, meaning that it only further allows Putin to micromanage the military situation. Putin lacks military expertise, and this won't improve the situation. Instead, it will very likely leave Dyumin caught between Putin's directives and the military apparatus pushing back on their own limitations. But worse than that, with the Russian military realizing this connection, then it makes them even more likely to feed false reports up the chain to avoid demotions. The Russian report-driven military, demoralizing and demilitarizing them since 2022, if not even longer. Now, also, for this region, as part of a non-military response, the acting governor of Kursk announced that he will begin evacuating residents from these areas to, wait for it, occupied Zaporizhia. Wow, you cannot make this stuff up. So the acting governor of the region stated that he called the governor of the Zaporizhia Oblast, Yevgeny Belitsky, where they discussed the situation and provided some solutions to relocate some Kursk residents, under the guise of, quote, safety of our citizens. And yes, I am too, scratching my head over the logic of this one. Then to the Russian POW angle, as there is no shortage of this news at the moment, with a further replenishment to the POW exchange fund for later on. With the Kursk fund said to be sitting on about a whopping 2,000 Russian soldiers. But don't worry about these Russian guys. They will get a hot meal and a warm bed tonight. In fact, Russian POWs are quite well known for putting on weight after they become prisoners of war within Ukraine. Then onto a bit of news, as Ukrainian President Zelenskyy continues to somewhat chime in on the situation, as he has most recently declared that the war will end on Ukraine's terms, restoring security to the nation, while taking a jab at Putin by stating, 24 years ago there was the Kursk disaster, the symbolic beginning of Putin's rule, and now it is clear that it is the end for him. Kursk again. As he did, of course, refer to the Russian submarine disaster under Putin's leadership back in 2000, suggesting that, perhaps symbolically, Kursk is where Putin's downfall truly begins. Then taking a look at Russia's late-night propagandists, who hold concerns about Ukraine conducting a large-scale operation at the end of August or beginning of September, as they are preparing their audience for another major Ukrainian offensive, which they seem to expect it to be enacted by blocking the land corridor through Zaporizhia, with additional further concerns about F-16 strikes on the Crimean Bridge. Poor guys, getting paranoid, they don't know what's coming next. Then as for some Russian politics, so Russia is continuing to try and reassure the population that there is no need for mobilization, with Russian military and political figure, Katapolov, once again seeming to set the record straight. And so the Kremlin has really been drilling this into the population for quite some time now, which would make it even more difficult of a decision to turn back on at a later stage, thereby not being something that would be well received by the population. The seeds are being sowed. And this is where it might get a bit tricky, because Ukraine's SBU, or the Security Service of Ukraine, has advised that special services of the Russian Federation may be, in the near future, stage crimes against civilians in the Kursk region in order to blame Ukraine for this. So a false flag attack, used as a tool to galvanize public support for mobilization, but the SBU also went on to state that such attempts are not beneficial and will not affect the offensive of the AFU. And moving along, because having a bit of a look at the overall summary of the day, as the Kursk incursions aim to achieve a few different goals, including to divert troops, but not just to Kursk, but spread them all along the north, making for quite a resource-intensive operation, or many sets of operations, for the Russian military. Also, these northern battles have produced the added outcome of taking a lot of Russian focus off striking at the Sumy and Kharkiv oblasts, forcing the Russian military to slowly switch gears and fire into their own territory, as these cross-border pursuits continue to have some legs on them, with the impressive level of sustainment that the AFU has achieved so far. Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off today, guys. So, Ukrainian soldiers are giving restaurant reviews in Kursk now, with one such member of the AFU providing a decent review to a local restaurant, whilst at the same time letting readers know about the small parking lot. Couldn't park his tank there. They're literally making quite the embarrassing joke of Russia. What a bunch of champions. So that has to be it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment and subscribe if not already. Thanks for sticking around. I do really appreciate the support as well. Helps keep things going. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.